Green and all
Right.
that. So how do you compare? I wanted to ask you about, because I was a youngin. I was like 10 years old when he got drafted, I believe.
Right.
How do you compare that era, the AJ Green and Andy Dalton era, to the Jamar Chase and Andy Dalton, I mean, Joe Burrow era right now?
I mean, I think that is real similar as far as like that draft and how major it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the 2011 draft was a special one for me because I was an AJ Green head before we even drafted him, right?
Word, word.
Like being a Bengals fan made me so hardcore that I had to study the draft and start looking at players. And so I remember AJ Green like just really being a special player. I hadn't really seen a wide receiver like that with just watching the highlights since like Megatron with Calvin Johnson.
Right.
And so when we drafted AJ Green, I always tell this story like I jumped up off of the couch, bro. Like it was like a
Yeah.
slam dunk for me. And then I had also kind of knew that they were really interested in Andy Dalton for sure. Cause I remember them like meeting with him at the Senior Bowl. And then when we went and got Andy, it was special. And I think that that team was extremely similar to what we have now with Burrow and Chase. It was a little different just because they were in the same class, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still kind of similar because the AJ and Andy team, nobody saw them like coming. They thought that we were going to end up like similar to this year. They were
Right,
like, oh,
right.
we're going to win 4 games. Like the national media didn't know anything. They were trying to say at one point, and that was like probably the last time that I watched ESPN, they were
Yeah.
saying that Jordan Palmer was going to be our starting quarterback. And I'm like, it's clear that y'all aren't even paying attention to anything going on.
I
And I think similarly to this squad with Chase and Burrow, you kind of had like some guys from the old team, but then you started to have a kind of a new nucleus of guys that they created. And so I think there's a lot of similarities between the two. I
Mhm.
would probably say that the Chase and Burrow combo is slightly better because of, and not to hate on Andy or anything, but Burrow is like the first quarterback that we've picked in the first round, like in that top 5 area or number 1 overall since Carson Palmer.
Right.
And to get him and Chase, which is like equivalent to AJ Green, who was like a top 5 pick, is just insane. But that's no taking away from what Andy and AJ were able to do. And I think both of those eras, they kind of centered the team around the quarterback and the wide receiver position, right? And that
Yeah.
like started a whole era of success that they had there. And I think that is going to do the same with this era as well.
Like I got goosebumps when you brought up the Jordan Palmer situation and all that, because I do remember, I forgot what our record was, but we were doing awful.
Right.
And it's like I'm a youngin' again. Like my whole
Right.
family hate on the Bengals. We joke about them, all this
Right.
and that. I believe we had, after that season, we had the opening week where they got the Broncos player. I forgot. It was,
Yeah. It was like, I think it was that Brandon Stokely?
yeah,
Yeah.
Stokely.
Brandon
Oh my
Stokely, bro.
God,
I
that
remember
haunts
that.
me. that
That haunts
that
me too. Yeah.
man. So that was just a quick side note. So Andy Dalton was I believe a second round pick, right?
Right.
So so when you talk about the top 5 picks, more we compare it to Andy Dalton and Joe
Right.
Burrow era. How does Joe Burrow compare to a Carson Palmer?
I think honestly, when it comes to like the hype and all of the
Mhm.
excitement and like kind of the pedigree, I think that they compare in that aspect, right? Like I
Yeah.
think Carson, when he came in, from what I could remember, and he's kind of talked about this on other episodes, he was kind of like, I'm gonna save the franchise. Like, I don't care, what the stigma is from the media and all of that. I'm gonna come in and save it. And I feel like Joe was the same way, but I
Yeah.
would probably say if you're talking about like they both were Heisman winners, so that's something that was similar. But I actually think because Carson didn't actually play his first season, like we had a quarterback by the name of John Kitna who played
Wow.
before him, and John Kitna, and I don't mean any disrespect with comparing them, but John Kitna was like Andy Dalton light. He wasn't as good as Andy Dalton,
Mhm.
but you could win with him And he actually, like, thinking about it, he actually was a really good quarterback for the Bengals in between when we had Jeff Blake until then. Like, he was the first quarterback that brought stability to the team and kind of led us to like that 8-8